Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Front Page Fitness. I am Eric Trexler. I am here with Dr. Lauren Colenso-Semple. This is, I believe, episode 6. Does that sound right, Lauren?
That sounds right.
All right. Well, we had a good run. I said during episode 5 at the beginning, that's usually when podcasts really start to pick up and get good. Regrettably, around episode 6 is when the podcasting hosts, their comments start to really catch up with them. And they essentially enjoyed their moment in the sun during episode 5, and now is time for the downfall. So I've been catching some heat in the comments, but nothing that is even close to what you are experiencing, Lauren. You are, I think it's fair to say, a pariah on the internet these days. People hate you. They do not like you. And they say you are a misogynist. They say you are a shill for the patriarchy. They say you're just trying to sell masculinized programs to unsuspecting women, and you don't think women should listen to their bodies, and I guess you don't think they should have the right to listen to their bodies. So what's going on?
Very interesting time to be me. And I went on a big podcast recently, came out, and people were very, very angry because I said, you know what, this kind of cycle syncing thing where it says, hey, you should lift heavy this week and do yoga that week and stay in bed the other week. Maybe not the best move. And people were very, very angry. This was highly offensive and anti-feminist of me to suggest that perhaps, you know what, women can just train around their whole cycle anytime. If you feel like crap one day, take a day off, auto-regulate, reduce intensity, back off, no problem. But otherwise, no need for these huge overhauls. You and I have talked about it many times at this point. The backlash was very, very real. I've been called a lunatic because I don't understand cortisol. I don't understand hormone imbalances. I don't understand the need to align women's bodies with the moon. That was it. I was educated in the...
What's interesting that you're being called a lunatic, and then they're saying you need to align with the lunar calendar a little bit better.
Yeah. So I've had an interesting couple days navigating the hate. It's funny because I never thought what I said was sort of that inflammatory. You'd think I had said women need to stay home and cook and clean and be quiet. Truly, that's the level of hate that I got from saying, you know what, this whole cycle syncing thing is probably not great, probably not that important. And as far as a masculine program, I'm yet to understand what exactly that is. First, I don't actually sell any programs at all, but if a masculine program is a program that's effective, if it's a program that actually works for the individual's goals, if it's a program that is something that is, rooted in evidence as opposed to all of this woo-woo bullshit, then sure, fine. I promote masculinized programs.
In the interest of being the only host of this show who is not a misogynist, I have to say, Lauren, you're being hysterical.
Right. Yeah.
No, you are catching flack. And honestly, I'm afraid to chime in because none of the things that you said, they would not have registered on my self-censorship radar of whoa, don't cross that line. You're going to catch hell for it. So I feel like I'm just skipping my way around a minefield here as if it were just a big field of daisies and I'm none the wiser. So I don't really know how to participate in this. I feel like it's going to be harder for me to beat the misogynist charges than you because I happen to be a man. But yeah, it's really interesting, the stuff that seems to be getting commandeered by I don't know. I remember the first time I heard someone suggest that if a strength coach isn't preemptively changing programming based on the menstrual cycle of each female athlete that they work with, that they like kind of don't care about women. And I remember that hitting my ear very incorrectly, in the sense that like that would be a true statement if we had robust literature suggesting that that was necessary and productive and feasible. Because like, let's be honest, like a lot of people who talk about strength coaching and what strength coaches ought to do, it's like sometimes I'll see the tweet and I'll be like, have you ever really walked into a room with 114 to 17-year-olds and just been in charge and said like, hey guys, we're going to train for 50 minutes? Because it kind of like anyone who's been there knows optimal is kind of out the window at that point. And it's kind of just like, how do we minimize liability and make sure no one literally dies during this workout? Obviously there's more to it, but there is a huge disconnect when I when you step away from training one person in a one-on-one setting in a well-equipped gym to all of a sudden you're training a whole team of people at the same time. But anyway, what I'm getting at is I don't understand how we jump from point A to point like K. And it's like all the stuff in the middle, which is like establishing those key assumptions to be true of like, this actually is necessary and useful and can be done well. And here's how you do it. Here's why you should do it. Here's how you do it. We just skipped all that stuff. So I'm sorry that you are catching the flack for that. But
Yeah, but let me ask you this. When you, back in the day, you're coaching a bunch of people,
yeah,
you get a new client, you have your first call or your first in-person meeting, whatever it is. For me, it's what are your goals? What's your background? What's your availability? What makes sense for you? What are your preferences? Those types of things. I've never approached a kind of coach-client interaction with, okay, so you are biological male, biological female, therefore we're going down this path versus this path. I mean, would you agree? Would you disagree? Do you approach it differently?
yeah. I mean, I was brought up, I was raised to believe that a very not cool thing to do to women is set limits to them automatically just because they're women. Like to me, that always seemed more on the side of misogyny than the alternative. So yeah, I've to answer your question directly, no, I don't like go in there and say, oh, let me give you the female program or the male program. If I bring in a female client, if we do need to navigate any elements related to their menstrual cycle, which is not always the norm, that will become apparent as we build the relationship and work together and go, mesocycle to mesocycle, week to week with training. So yeah, those types of conversations about like, how am I going to sync this program to your cycle, or how am I going to give you the program that is for people with a menstrual cycle versus the one that's not? Those have never at all been, not even at top of mind. They've never been in my mind. It's never been a thing I've had to do. I have had some percentage of female clients I've worked with who have had particularly notable symptoms, at certain periods of their menstrual cycle. And we probably spent, and I know people are going to throw this back at me and say it's because you're a shitty coach and you're not a good guy. Didn't really spend a lot of time talking about it because it wasn't necessary. Basically, they would tell me, hey, I moved that Thursday workout to Friday because I was feeling bad on Thursday. And I said, well, that sounds to me like a perfect change to the program. Good job. And we kept moving forward. I was always clear with my clients. If you need to make adjustments, here's how you do it. Here's kind of how we sequence minor adjustment, moderate adjustment, major adjustment. So it's not like there's no framework in place, but treat
But
it.
don't you do that with your male clients, female clients, older clients, younger clients?
Yeah, that's just a
Like
normal thing.
sometimes people have bad days. They don't feel well. They
Yeah,
have low energy. Something comes up. They
yeah.
have to move
So
something.
it's weird. And also cycles syncing. When I saw that, the first time I saw that written, I don't know if it was in the outline for this episode, but didn't that used to refer to like when like multiple women uh who are
Uh,
eumenoric like
like aligned to the
cohabitate?
same.
Yeah, wasn't that usually what that always meant? This seems like a repurposing of that term.
It is. That term isn't really a thing either. But
Correct. Yeah.
yeah. So when I started doing this work, like we called it phase-based training because
Yeah.
that's sort of what it is. But now it's become cycle syncing and this idea of, you have to listen to your body when in fact, I guarantee you have no idea what your hormone levels are. This is not something you subjectively feel. We can measure it, but having measured it through in tons of women over tons of cycles, I guarantee you don't even know what phase you're in. You don't know what your progesterone levels are. It doesn't work that way. So this idea that uh, we should be listening to our bodies and waking up and feeling like, oh, wow, I'm low progesterone today. Therefore, I need to do this. It's not reality. And it's really, really frustrating for me because it's all a marketing shtick for these people to say, hormone balancing coaching, you need to fix something. Nothing's wrong. We don't need to fix anything. You don't need a hormone balancing coach. I don't even know what that is. Hormones shouldn't be balanced. If the hormones were balanced, there would be no menstrual cycle. The idea that you have low progesterone, yeah, you're supposed to for several weeks in the cycle because high estradiol is a thing for half the cycle. High progesterone is a thing for another part of the cycle. That's the whole point. So I'm annoyed because it just feels like this whole overcomplication has become synonymous with female empowerment. And in fact, it's the opposite because when I was a teenager, I remember a woman would get pissed and a guy would say, oh, you must be PMSing, right? Like, oh, you're on your period. And we would be really irritated by that, would be offended by that. Like, no, it's not about my period. I'm just annoyed. I have emotions and I'm allowed to.
You're being
And
an
now,
asshole. That's why I don't like you.
right.
It
Like,
has nothing to do with biology. Yeah.
and now it's the women who have become a way worse version of that toxic man.
You can't whip that. You have a period.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, it's really weird. Everyone's going through a phase, no pun intended. I'm hoping that as a field we will gather our breath and move past it. But no, I am sorry that you have waded into these waters, but I do think it's all for the best. I've told you this privately off air, but the best thing that you could possibly have as a person who creates content is a mission, a thing, a motivating topic that can serve as something that is, a place where content is needed, where there's a lot of chatter, where it actually is valuable. Like there's no space anymore for someone to come in and say, I think creatine will get you a few extra reps. Like that's not you can't really sink your teeth into that, and it's not really helping anybody beyond how they've already been helped. So
nobody's getting mad about it.
I do think that it's good that you're in here fighting the good fight, and unfortunately, you're going to take a few arrows in the process. But hey, you did a whole PhD related to the topic, so I feel like you should have a little bit of stamina and be able to go to toe with some folks, be able to go toe to toe with some folks.
Moving into some lighter news on
Yes.
Front Page Fitness. Have you heard of fart walks?
Um, that's a hard transition. I see it in the outline. I have not heard of it. I purposely didn't read the articles because I'd like to take a stab at it,
Okay.
if I may.
Yeah.
Let's say that a fart walk is maybe I'm just gonna guess after a meal, maybe you're feeling a bit heavy and bloated, you go for a walk and try to fart a lot. Is that what's happening?
Essentially, yeah.
Is it after a meal?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. There you go. So the idea here, I get there. It's commonly said that it's not a bad idea to go take a walk after a meal. Get some substrates moving around. Get some digestion going. Um, but I must ask, how do the farts fit into the picture?
So essentially, the idea is, you're trying to promote digestive health, and the good old New York Post says that this is going to prevent cancer, which, may be a bit of a reach. But apparently this is an Instagram, TikTok trend where people are making videos of their fart walks. And the good old medical professionals are saying, you'll reduce your risk of developing type 2 diabetes and cancer because we want to relieve the gas. And
So,
um,
what is the gas doing in there to cause all this diabetes, and what's happening in there?
yeah, apparently it's wreaking havoc on the digestive system.
Good Lord,
Um,
you look away for 2 seconds, and all this air in your body is giving you diabetes.
and cancer and
Yeah,
premature death. Don't forget premature
yeah.
death. So, um, yeah, the farting while walking thing is interesting because it's often couples going for a walk when sometimes with a dog
Yeah.
and everyone's just, releasing crop dusting the trail if you will.
So here's the thing I don't understand. At some point, someone said, "Hey, you should go take a walk after meals, and it might have some positive effects on digestion and things like that." And I'm good with that. And glycemic control, after a meal, great. Go for a walk. I'm not against walking after a meal, but I want to know what sequence of events happened where someone said, "I just want to make it really clear that when I'm doing this, I'm farting a lot." And not only am I not ashamed of that, that is actually really a major part of the intervention that I'm essentially putting myself through. Like I want to know how someone said, no, 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 we need to soup this idea up a lot. And the way to do that is just to make sure that you're farting a lot. There is, I don't know, I've been loosely interested in fitness to varying degrees since I was 12 years old. It's been well over 20 years now. And when I see stories like this, I know we will never run out. There will always be new trends and new things. And thank God for social media for helping to proliferate these at a level we've never before seen.
Since I know you're a major Canada hater,
Yeah.
this trend and term was apparently coined by a Toronto-based cookbook author uh, who is the self-proclaimed queen of fiber. And so she said that, she likes to set out on a stroll with her husband after mealtime and let it rip.
Yeah. Okay, I see what's happening now. That fills it in a lot. So basically, this person is probably eating like 70 grams of fiber a day, and presumably the person they cohabitate with is also eating 70 grams of fiber a day. They are farting nonstop in the home, and this was just a practical way of let's just try to get it out of our system, out there, dissipate it, contribute to all the greenhouse gases with the methane and all that. But let's just try to take this out of the home for 2 seconds so we can try to enjoy a nice evening. That's clearly how this went down.
Maybe if the raw egg guy had done the fart walks, then he could have saved his relationship.
Yeah, you never know. And that's what's tragic about love, is that you can never really go back and test the counterfactual. But I do believe that if he had done between the 30 egg smoothies and the weird mango ice cream, if he had just gone for a walk, and farted a lot, it could
The
have been
game
very
changer.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Lauren. I have no idea how you want to set up this next monstrosity of a topic. I really don't.
When I saw this, I thought it was a spoof. I thought It
I
was.
did too. Because I don't want to be mean, but you definitely got trolled. I don't know if you were a willing participant in that, but the double block of cheese sandwich was clearly a trolling job.
Right.
And so we have
And
to
I
be
felt
careful and make sure that we're not just, you know, treating all the troll bait as if it's, legitimate news. But I much like you, I thought this was fabricated, non-serious, but it seems to be real. So please, however you want to introduce this, by all means.
this is a thing. These are for sale. Uh New liquid silicone dumbbells. And so the marketing of this is that they're safer because you can drop them and they aren't going to hurt you.
Yeah.
They are shaped like phallic objects.
Yeah, they are shaped in such a way and made of such a material that you might say, "Oh, do I get that at my local fitness shop?" Or when I grew up in Ohio, you take 71 North up towards Columbus, and there was an interesting building with no windows called the Lion's Den that sold. Who knows what they sell in there? There's no windows, but it seemed to be adult themed. And so I think they probably had a number of silicone dumbbells in there as well, whether they knew it or not. Um, but yeah,
And such silicone dumbbells might be used for non weightlifting activities, perhaps.
correct. Yeah, whoever designed this, it was a good effort, but I feel like this individual is surrounded by yes men who just, every time they put together a design, they say, "You killed it. I don't know how you keep doing it. It's beautiful." And they really need some better friends in their circle who will say, "You know what? I believe this product has already been designed and it's actually not typically a fitness tool." Uh,
Have you seen How I Met Your Mother?
I've seen some episodes, not all of them.
There's a whole storyline in there where Ted, the main character, he's an architect and he's working at the firm, and his boss is designing this building, and it's a very phallic architectural design.
Yeah.
And and then he wants kind of shrubbery around the bottom of the mock-up. It sort of reminds me of this because this is very, very clearly there's no way to mistake it, right?
Yeah.
We're not making a leap here, which is why it has gone viral. But maybe that was the point. One
Oh,
thing I will say, just as far as efficacy, they don't seem very heavy.
they don't. I mean, they look like they couldn't possibly weigh more than like half a pound, maybe a couple. Um, yeah, so I don't know. I'm gonna pass for now. I'm gonna stick with the iron. I'm contractually obligated because I also co-host the Iron Culture podcast, so it doesn't really make sense to call it the Silicone Culture podcast. That feels like a different thing entirely. Is it a podcast dedicated to cosmetic procedures? Is it dedicated to adult themed instruments? Is it dedicated to maybe just tech? Maybe it's just a Silicon Valley kind of deal.
Oh, okay.
It's
That
There's a lot of ways it could go, none of which really fit my key areas of interest. So I'm sticking with the iron, and buyer beware. Make your own decisions out there. I'm going to pass on these.
Also a Canadian-based company,
You're kidding
not
me.
Canada.
What? Okay. I get a lot of flack every time I jokingly rib you about Canada, but at a certain point, like, you guys got to help me out here between the fart walks and this. Like, take a little bit of personal responsibility and tighten things up there.
I'll pass along that message.
All
Our
right,
next
now
big
Lauren,
headline here.
yeah, we got a headline that seems to be formed as a quiz.
It is. So the headline, again, New York Post, shout out. Thank you for all the great content. This cheap, tasty snack will help you live to 100. So I said, don't read it
Yeah.
because I want you to guess. What do you think?
Okay, it's cheap, so we're probably talking about a carb heavy thing.
It's not caviar.
Right. Yeah. So it's cheap and protein's pretty expensive these days. So I'm going to think it's probably carb heavy. It's tasty. Okay, fair enough. It's a snack. Uh I'm going to say rice cakes.
No, I'm disappointed. I actually thought you were on track to get it.
Okay.
Rice cakes aren't tasty. Come on. Rice
Oatmeal?
cakes are bodybuilder food.
Oh, oatmeal's definitely bodybuilder food. Okay,
It's tasty. You like it.
but it's going to help me live to 100 though. Unless you're suggesting that this this headline is taking liberties with the factual medical information.
New York Post? Never. Come on.
Okay, so it's not rice cakes, it's not oatmeal. A good old classic apple.
It's low in calorie, high in fiber,
Okay.
and can promote feelings of fullness. This is popcorn.
Oh, popcorn. That's, you know what? I'm really disappointed that I didn't get that because I actually do have an air popper, which people in the fitness world know air popping is the way to do your popcorn. Um, but yeah, I'm a big fan of popcorn as a snack. I tend to go a little heavier on the butter than I ought to. Um, we talked a lot about canned cheese products and
Mm.
specifically Cheese Whiz on the podcast. A lot of people will think this is gross, but I really like canned butter, like aerosol canned butter. It's like a spray that's not actually made out of butter, but it tastes like butter. But basically, you get out the air popper, pop up a big bowl, spray it. It's like Pam, but it's butter flavored. Toss it around with some salt. That is a lovely snack. Now, Lauren, I feel like you are skeptical that this is going to help me live to 100.
I'm not really getting the live to 100 piece here.
Yeah.
But i- apparently, research has shown that incorporating more whole grains like popcorn can reduce your risk of dementia. So there's that. Um, and uh, eating more whole grains can reduce your risk of heart disease, stroke, diabetes, and colon cancer. And that's pretty much how they're getting to. Oh, and since it's low calorie, high fiber, it can aid in your feeling of fullness. So it seems to be a miracle food. And we talked about apples last time. Definitely eat multiple apples per day because of that chlorogenic acid. It's going to be a game changer for fat loss immediately. And so, movie theater popcorn, for sure, a longevity game changer.
Yeah, they literally I'm allowed to open the link now, so I did. There's literally a picture of popcorn from a movie theater that's just covered in butter and salt. So I don't know if maybe if you account for that, it drops you down to living to like 99 and a half. Take a couple points off for that. But Lauren, you have led me straight into a trap that I'm all too familiar with here because there is an image of a gentleman. It says he's revealing the best snack to live to 100. And that individual is Dan. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Bittner or Butner. And Lauren, does that name ring a bell to you?
This is a longevity expert, someone that we should be getting a ton of our health advice from for sure.
So this is the guy who popularized and might have even like coined the phrase, if I'm not mistaken, of blue zones.
You love your blue zones.
So you know that you led me right into just a total pet peeve of mine, which is the concept of blue zones. But I'm glad my goal is for him to put out as much content as he possibly can. Because I want people, when they think of blue zones, to equate it to the same level of evidence of movie theater popcorn to live until you're 100 years old. Same source, apparently, and similar level of rigor. I'm going to trust that Dan was kind of walking through a picturesque Italian countryside or maybe in a beautiful island of Greece where everyone mysteriously lives to be 130 and they were all having movie night eating popcorn. And he said, well, there you go. Now we know. But that's yeah. So for people who are familiar with blue zones, they are the zones in the world where allegedly people live very, very, very long, and so they're supposed to have higher numbers. It's not just like that the average life expectancy it's high. It's like, oh, over here there's just like a bunch of people who live to be like 120 or 100, whatever. So name your number that's like quite high, 90s, hundreds and above. And it's like, well, hey, why is everybody living so long? And so the concept of blue zones is like looking into these lifestyles in these areas and saying, oh, they drink red wine, they enjoy time with family, they don't work so hard, they walk more. And so like if you followed all the recommendations you get from blue zones, you would end up in a situation where you are generally doing things that are good for your health, right? It's like eat a low-ish, moderate calorie Mediterranean diet with high quality foods that are locally sourced and spend time with your family and have purpose in life and walk around a lot. This is all good stuff. Like it's all fine. The problem is, a researcher dug into this concept of blue zones and just absolutely eviscerated the topic and essentially to boil down an entire long paper with a zillion analyses into a concise statement. It was basically like the things that seem to predict longevity in these areas is uh, poverty and areas where it is really, really easy to commit fraud and collect pensions after you're dead. Those are like the two biggest predictors of living to be like 130. So you can do with that information what you will, Lauren. Some people, some very cynical people, some nasty people are going to say that that maybe suggests that there's something other than extreme longevity happening in these areas. Also, these blue zones, we've known about them long enough where a fairly common characteristic is that they generally, about 100 years ago, didn't take or keep good records of when people were born. So that greatly increases your likelihood of being like 120 is if you have fundamentally no idea when you were born and no documentation of that. And as those areas in more modern times have gotten better at that documentation, their instances of extreme longevity have gone down quite a bit. So it could be that once you know how old you are, you're less likely to be like 120. Or once we all found out about the blue zones, we found a way to contaminate them in such a way that they no longer are quite as protective as they used to be. So I'll leave that open to your interpretation, Lauren.
Does the prospect of living to 120 appeal to you? Is that something that you personally want to strive for?
Uh, no, no. Yeah, I just got to the point with surgical intervention that I can like walk comfortably. Jogging is still a maybe.
All the
So,
silicone?
what's that?
All the silicone implant?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've also had
You
many.
know, recovery was really difficult for you.
Yeah, it was worth it though.
That's why you're wearing those geriatric pants, that fake ass.
Yes, I need extra space. But it was worth it. And between that and the many concussions I've had, I don't really love the long-term prospect for how these neurons are going to be working. So,
Mm.
um, yeah, I think, I've lived a good life. I live hard. I feel like if I can squeeze out another 10 or 11 years, maybe see 45, I'll be like, that's fine. But no, 120 is a bit far off for me. What about you? I feel like how old do you want to get?
If I'm living well and physically functioning and cognitively functioning, sure. And I still have living friends and family, but
Not going to happen. The
um
grand prize of living super long is that you outlive every person you love.
right. And so you see everyone around you die, that sucks.
Yeah.
And then certainly if you're just still slowly declining and you don't have a good quality of life, then pass.
Yeah. Not to be a downer. I'm sure it's great, guys. Like, I'm sure it's terrific. Uh,
Side note, in this New York Post article with the popcorn, that bucket of popcorn is very clearly kind of photoshopped onto his glass.
Yeah, it, it's Photoshop, and it's so badly Photoshopped. It almost
Really bad.
I almost thought it was an emoji at first. I was like I thought they were just doing a text overlay with an emoji to accentuate it. So yeah, I don't know what they were going for there. I feel like popcorn's not that hard to get your hands on. Um, Even the stock image they put at the bottom of it is just a woman shopping with like prepackaged. It looks like pasta and like maybe mashed potato stuff. It like this woman is not holding popcorn or shopping for popcorn. So New York Post, I gotta say, I love the content, but the image quality could really be upgraded here, if I may.
We'll send a letter to the editor.
But I'm not allowed to say bad things about New York either, because I get
Yeah,
beat up on the
it's always
podcast.
Canada or New York. You're doing it again. Here.
I mean, some people would say that that's a bit prophetic to kind of call them out preemptively, and now the show just reiterates time and time again bad stock image selection and for some reason fart walks and silicone dumbbells. And I do want to get out ahead of this. I'm going to pronounce silicone differently every time I say it. Okay, so I don't need any hate mail about that. That's just the way I roll. I don't understand how to say that word. All right, Lauren. Our
Silicone.
silicone, yeah.
Silicone and silicon is different. The Silicon Valley is not Silicone Valley.
I
One
don't know
has an E
anything
and the
about
other
this
does
stuff.
not.
Okay. It's all the same to me.
All right.
I'm like I said, I'm not big into cosmetic surgery other than my BBL. I'm not that into the tech world, so this is why I don't have Silicon Culture podcast.
I noticed this week that you started really shilling some of your products on Instagram. The pants, the walking pad, some weird light box. And of course, the comments come flooding in, send us the link, send us the discount code. I would think if we were going to sponsor the podcast, we would do that in a collaborative way. We would really discuss what we would promote. And you're just going completely rogue and using it for your own financial gain. And I really just would like to discuss that because I think it's problematic and the audience is outraged and you need to explain yourself.
I have extreme gambling debts and I need this. That's the full explanation. I made a lot of good bets and they just didn't go my way. Had some bad beats on some big parlays during the college football season, and now we are where we are. But you see that stylish lamp right there behind me? Beautiful stylish lamp next to the little plant on the bookcase. That is my light box. It's just a little light that basically it's like 10,000 lux in terms of the intensity, filters out the UV light, and it kind of meets all the metrics that you'd want for light therapy, for entraining your circadian rhythm, and for potentially offsetting seasonal affective disorder symptoms if you happen to experience them. But I like to use it in the morning to help me wake up. I walk on my walking pad as part of my morning routine, get the light box blaring light into my eyeballs, safely, of course, avert the eyes, have a little coffee, a little protein, play a little
and
college
do some
football.
online gambling.
Well, no, instead of wasting away my fortune on college football gambling, I play the college football 2025 video game on my PlayStation. So it's a way of interacting with the sport without jeopardizing my future.
Right.
Yeah. And unless you want me to get going about college football, we better move on because I'll do it.
Pass.
All right.
And video games are definitely a no-go on this podcast. The sound of the nerd is just, grinding.
It's different though, like, because you're not really in the gamer community if you're like, yeah, I play college football exclusively. You're just kind of like the sad, washed up, peaked in high school, wishes he played football still kind of guy. Washed up meathead.
Sound better to me. Like that makes you
different though.
Cooler than the gamer nerd.
No, it's a different
gamer community.
It's definitely more sad, but it's just a different flavor.
Okay.
Yeah, because there's nothing sad about being a nerd or a gamer, but there is something sad about the way I interact with football.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So, what in the world are we dealing with here?
You want to talk calories in, calories out?
Yeah, but why? What happened here?
Because apparently it's old news. That's not how it works, especially if you're a woman. It's this is the patriarchy again, so take it from me. But basically, calories in, calories out is outdated. The idea that you need to be in a calorie deficit for fat loss is not the thing. It's probably something else. We're not entirely sure what it is. Could be something hormone related, be it cortisol, be it insulin, be it sex hormones, who knows. But calories in, calories out ain't the thing. And last time I saw you, you gave a really interesting presentation on this very topic. So, what do you
Yes.
think?
So here's the thing about calories in, calories out. The general premise is your energy balance is going to be a consequence of a essentially a sum that can be calculated in a literal way, which is the calories coming into your body and the calories leaving your body over a given period of time. So if you're consistently consuming more calories than you expend on a regular basis over a longer period of time, you're going to accumulate more stored body energy. And then, of course, if you're burning more calories than you're actually taking in, then the theory goes that you will be losing stored energy and by extension, losing body mass over time. Now, let me start out with a controversial statement. Calories in, calories out, as it's typically explained by people interested in health and wellness and fitness and their physiques and stuff, is almost always oversimplified in a way that is technically not true. And that is intellectually honest to acknowledge. The reality is that calories in, calories out, the spirit of it, and if you get into a very technical definition, can become true and essentially is true. But it turns out it's very complicated, Lauren. So, for example, a lot of people will kind of lay it out in this oversimplified way and say, like, okay, calories in equals if you look at the back of the calorie labels on the food you eat and you add all that up, that's the calories you consume every day. And if you happen to gain weight, then that number is higher than your total daily energy expenditure, right? And if you add all those calorie labels up and you happen to be losing weight over a given period of time, then that means your expenditure is higher than the sum of those calorie labels. So that's
I'd add to that the number of calories you see on the elliptical that, when you get off and then you say, oh, I burned 400 calories and therefore I can add that to my, allowance for
yes.
my intake for today, right?
Yes. Yeah. And so just to kind of be transparent about this whole calories in, calories out business as a person who literally I think, working in the Poncer lab at Duke, like calories are really what we do. Like we are a calorie lab. Um, it's important to recognize a few things. First of all, the calorie labels on your food products are going to have estimation error. And probably more than you think. We're not talking like 1% for a given product. We're talking, I think what's the legal threshold is like no more than like 20% error, I think is how it works. And of course, I'm sure that varies from Lord knows what they're doing in Canada. I think that's the American kind of error buffer that they allow.
There's no standards at all in Canada. It's the
Yeah.
Wild West. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, so there's going to be estimation error that honestly is considerable. It is a substantial level of estimation error that is allowable and will be seen. And from product to product, if you grab two versions of the same product that were packaged on different days at different facilities and all that other stuff, you're going to find some variation in the actual caloric content. Now, we have to keep in mind that calorie extraction from the diet is not 100%. It's, there's usually going to be some percentage of calories, sometimes in the like 5-ish% range, sometimes up into the 10-ish% range that they're going to be calories that you put into your mouth and chewed and swallowed, and you did not actually extract them. They were
You
eliminated.
went in a fart walk.
Yeah,
There you go.
you went on the fart walk and other things happened, and basically your body didn't absorb those calories. And there are a lot of contextual factors and, variation from food to food that can impact the exact efficiency with which you actually absorb energy from the foods that you eat. So already we're having issues on the calories inside. On the calories outside, the number that you're seeing on the elliptical it's not just that there's potential for error. I consider it to be fundamentally useless. And that is as a person who has obsessed with how many calories we burn from being physically active. That is like a major pillar of the research that I do currently. So the reality is it's very hard to make an estimate of how many calories you're burning on a daily basis without any other kind of sources of information. Wearable technologies so far are not adequate. Doubly labeled water is good if you're just interested in total daily energy expenditure, but it's expensive and it's difficult to access for most people. So if you really want to...
I'm going to interrupt for a second because
Yeah.
I think it's probably worth spending a bit more time on the, I'm wearing an Apple Watch or a Garmin or whatever. It tells me how many calories I burned during this walk or during this exercise session. Is it any utility in that? How much stock are you putting in that?
So the last time I looked into these in a deep way, I did not believe that they were good enough for estimating caloric expenditure to be useful. That's not to say they can't be used for anything. So a lot of those wearable devices will give you a really good estimate of your step count, or they will give you a really good estimate of your heart rate, depending on the exact model and manufacturer. So I'm not saying that they're useless across the board for all metrics that they put out, but for total daily energy expenditure, they're just not good enough. And I'm doing some research on this right now, and I'll be interested in. I'm going to be having people who, at the exact same time that they're doing doubly labeled water measurements, which is a gold standard for total daily energy expenditure, they're going to be wearing a wearable fitness device on the wrist. They're going to be wearing an accelerometer on the hip, more of a research grade device. So we'll be able to kind of triangulate it and see how well they did. I have no doubt that those things can get incrementally better over time. So I'm not saying they'll always be insufficient for this purpose, but for now, I've not seen a validation of any of those wearable devices or watches that would make me say, yes, you can wear that and it will tell you how many calories you burn in a valid and reliable way.
I also don't see a utility in using this in a situation where, let's say, you're tracking your caloric intake, your macros using some sort of app, and then you're incorporating that other data and trying to sort of meld it together to develop how much am I expending versus intaking and what's my overall energy balance. I would say that would be an overly complicated and not productive exercise.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, if you were, I mean, there's certainly a personality type out there. It's not mine, but it exists where some people just really like to track a ton of stuff and just play with their data. And so, like, I'm not going to yuck your yum. If you're really into doing that, I'm not going to, take the watch off of your wrist and say, no, you're not allowed to. But yeah, there's easier ways to get where you're trying to go than having all that data and trying to triangulate all of it. So there's a few important things. Like I said, with calories in, calories out, nutrition labels not so great. It's really difficult to know exactly how many calories you're absorbing from the foods you actually did eat, even if the labels were totally accurate. Very difficult to get an estimate of how many calories you're burning during physical activity. And even beyond that, I mean, we do some research in populations all over the world. There's a lot of populations where the burden of pathogen exposure is way higher. And these folks are kind of chronically mounting immune responses, which impact energy expenditure. Uh, Thermoregulatory factors are going to impact energy expenditure if you're in an environment that's uncomfortably hot or cold. All this other stuff that, I mean, your watch has no chance of picking up on, right? So there's a lot going on there. And another thing I want to mention is, a lot of times people talk about calories in, calories out. And if you lost weight, then you were in a deficit. And if you gained weight, then you were definitely in a surplus. And while those heuristics more often than not hold up, they are not strictly true because body weight changes can be due to changes in things like muscle mass, or they can be due to changes in things like fat mass. And so you can construct some of these odd little scenarios that are not impossible at all, where, for example, a person gains weight, but they are technically in a caloric deficit. Or a person loses weight, but they are technically in a caloric surplus. And it's all about that ratio of how much weight is changing in terms of the fat mass compartment versus the fat-free mass compartment. So all that is to essentially extend out an olive branch and say, if you're frustrated that calories in, calories out is complicated and maybe more nuanced than people typically speak of it, you are correct. And in fact, Kevin Hall had he's had a number of great papers on this topic. But if you really want to calculate calories in, calories out the way it ought to be done, a lot of people think that the equation is as follows. You've got three terms: calories in, calories out, and change in body weight, right? In those papers, it's a list of over 60 equations with a whole bunch of Greek letters, right? You have to account for, well, what's happening with total body water, what's happening with glycogen, how much of the fat changes fat mass versus fat-free mass. So it's literally like 64 equations that make up calories in, calories out. And frankly, even that's an oversimplification, right? We model things because we're trying to distill a more complicated thing into a more kind of concise, simpler model that we can do these calculations with. So all that is to say, if you think there's more to it than those three terms in an equation, you're correct. However, Lauren, at the end of the day, it still works. When you go through those 64 equations, it absolutely does work. There is no debating, no doubting that there is a direct relationship between energy and mass. And if we look at just really basic examples of, hey, let's say instead of calories in based on the label of your food product, let's say the calories your body has absorbed from the diet. And let's say calories out is the actual number of calories that you did burn on a daily basis. And let's make it simple and say that your muscle mass and fat-free mass are relatively stable day to day and week over week. Because for most people, they typically are, right? Unless you're doing a new resistance training program, or you have, you're unfortunately in some accident and now you're immobilized and you're losing muscle mass precipitously. For most people, we can assume that fat-free mass is going to be relatively constant if they're not doing anything totally out of the norm. So we got the energy absorbed from our body. We've got the energy we're burning on a daily basis. If we watch weight slowly trickling up, and we actually could calculate those numbers precisely, we would find, generally speaking, yes, we can calculate based on the change in fat mass and based on the change in fat-free mass, how many excess calories were coming into this system versus the number leaving the system. That math works. The physics works. The biochemistry works. Simply put, it all works. It's just nuanced. But Lauren, the reason people brought this up is not because they doubt physics or math or biochemistry per se. They're saying, what about women over 50, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of chatter around that somehow this totally changes and you become resistant to fat loss, and I'm doing everything that I used to do and it's not working anymore, and therefore something else must be going on.
Yeah. So one of the things that can be really tricky is, as we age, a lot of things happen. I mean, first of all, the hydration constant of fat-free mass changes as we age. Like there's like literal changes that occur. So like if you go back to those old tables of, okay, we're doing like underwater weighing and we need to put in this coefficient, that coefficient. Like there are physiological changes that happen as we age. Uh, but notably, none of them actually debunk or threaten the concept of calories in, calories out in any way at all. Calories in, calories out is a, like I said, mathematical, physical, and biochemical fact of how the body is going to either tap into stored energy if there is a energetic shortfall, or it will store excess chemical energy as fat mass typically when there is an abundance of calories introduced to the system relative to calorie expenditure. Uh, as we get older, a lot of stuff changes. We if we're not careful and we're not really diligent, we tend to lose a substantial amount of fat-free mass. We lose a lot of muscle mass if we're not, staying active and lifting weights and things of that nature. So a lot of people will notice that even when they seem to be doing the same general stuff, maybe they're not quite as active as they used to be. Maybe they're not doing what they need to do in order to maintain muscle mass as they age. And so they're like, well, wait a minute. It seems like, the waistline is getting a little bigger. It seems like the clothing is fitting differently. Maybe the scale is moving upward a little bit. There's a lot of these things that we don't really notice are changing on a day-to-day basis, but they really are. And, and then that doesn't even account for all the various ways in which we might have transient fluctuations in water weight that kind of distort our perception of what our body weight is at any given time. So all that is to say, like, yes, it can be really frustrating and confusing to try to troubleshoot fat loss when it's not going well. And it's not fun. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. It's a really stressful thing for a lot of people, and it's really challenging. But what we don't want to do, Lauren, when we run into things that are challenging and confusing and stressful, we don't want to pull that really appealing lever, which is screw this. Everything I thought I knew was wrong. Let's start from scratch with a fundamentally different paradigm of how this all works. It's a very appealing thing to want to do. I mean, I can speak from experience, Lauren. I recently had taken for a long time a medication that is known to cause weight gain by increasing appetite. And I was talking to Helms about this, Eric Helms, off the air, and I swear it's such a crazy experience because I was like, I haven't changed anything, and my weight keeps going up and up and up. And essentially what was happening was I was having this increase in appetite that I know what it was caused by, but it didn't feel like a dramatic change. But it's just like at every single meal, if you just eat a tiny bit more than you used to, and you keep doing that over and over and over, I remember stepping on the scale, seeing a number I'd never seen in my life and thinking, holy shit, like what happened? And I've been studying physiology since I was 18 years old. It's been a long time. And so those exact ideas popped into my head in that split second where I stepped on the scale, saw the number, said, oh my God. And I was like, I wonder if I have some kind of weird hormone problem. Like maybe I have like a gland thing going on. And I was like, well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And it was like all these like common things that you hear. And of course, everyone in the fitness world just rolls their eyes and says, no, you're eating too much and you're not burning enough calories. Like I totally get how when you can't pinpoint a thing that changed and you see the scale going up and up and up, my God, is it frustrating and stressful and confusing? And it is so tempting to say like, well, I know I'm not like going out of my way to eat more. It's not like I'm leaving every meal overly full. It's not like I've dramatically changed my my physical activity. So something else is going on, and this calories in, calories out nonsense is BS. But at the end of the day, like it's really not up for debate. It's as settled science as settled science can get. And the most empowering thing we can do when we're in these situations where, body weight is drifting upward or our body composition is changing and we can't pinpoint why, instead of doing the kind of proverbial, like you're sitting at the board game and you just turn the table over and the pieces scatter all over the floor, we have to do the harder thing, which is to sit down and say, we need to really meticulously talk through what's going on here and think through what's going on here and see if we can pinpoint exactly what changes need to be made in order to move things in the intended direction.
If you were coaching somebody who is going through this type of scenario and you know that they need to feel heard, they don't want to feel dismissed because they honestly believe that, no, what I used to do isn't working anymore. How do you as a coach deal with that interaction?
Yeah, and I used to do that all the time. So like Lauren, you talk about all these folks who are like making content. Oh, you need to do all this stuff with your menstrual cycle. Who do you think their clients are? Obviously, you make all that content, you attract a bunch of clients who are like, I've got this thing going on with my menstrual cycle or with menopause, and like the kind of content you make attracts the type of clientele that's going to come to you, right? And for many years, I've been making all this content about like energy expenditure, metabolic adaptation, challenges during weight loss. So I say all that just to kind of establish the preface here, which is that a lot of people came to work with me because of this. Like, because not necessarily in the context of like perimenopause or anything, but just people who are like, I do everything the way I need to diet, and my body is stubborn and I'm in starvation mode. And I read this paper you wrote, and I think you have the secrets for me. And I would sit down with them and say, well, the first secret is there's no secrets. Like, so it's really important to get that established on the front end. However, I believe you. I believe that you are fully under the impression that your energy expenditure must be extremely low because of the rate of weight loss you're experiencing or lack of weight loss at a low calorie intake. What I want to do is work with you and not try to convince you you're wrong and not try to doubt you and not try to gaslight you or anything like that. But I just want us to engage in a really targeted intervention of measurement. So I want to know about your sleep schedule, and I want to know about everything you ate at breakfast and lunch and dinner and any other meals and anything in between. I want to know about your beverage intake. I want to know about your sodium intake. I want to know about your step count. I want to know about how much of the day you spend in sedentary activities. So what I would do is what I kind of would refer to as an energy audit, where it was like, we are going to leave no stone unturned. And I think as a coach, that's like the biggest sign of the best way to indicate to a client that you are listening to them, you hear them, and you take seriously their concerns is to say, okay, let's both work harder to make sure we know everything that's happening here. And you know what? If the result of this turns out and it's like, wow, you are truly an anomaly and you're burning like 900 calories per day, on the front end, I commit to accepting that reality if we run into it. But more often than not, what we would find out is that people have become tremendously sedentary. And we would find out that, to be honest, a lot of the folks who were like, no, I only eat this many calories, but it didn't turn out to be the case. We would find out things like they weren't tracking vegetables. They weren't tracking sauces and condiments. They weren't tracking little tiny snacks throughout the day. Oh, it's a little 100-calorie pack of nuts. What could it matter? Well, if you have 4 of them, it can matter to the tune of 400 calories, over the course of a day. And the other one that's really sneaky, a lot of the folks who were in that position had children, had young children. And a lot of times what I would find out is that their dinner was, a piece of chicken and a sweet potato and the broccoli and water and 3.5 chicken nuggets. It was always like these little things that would sneak their way in. And it was always like in the unit of chicken nuggets, because that's what they could get their kids to eat. And so a lot of times it's those little things that sneak in, and I would work with clients and I would say, okay, so we were initially our starting point or our starting understanding was that you were consuming about 1,400 calories per day. We have actually, with fairly minimal investigation here, we've worked our way from 1,400 to 1,950. And if we look at your rate of weight loss over time, it's not technically zero. It's actually a very slow downward trend. And if we actually do the math of calories in, calories out, the way the good Lord intended, we actually find that all this makes sense. And
Yeah.
so far, Lauren, in my career, that has been the outcome 100% of the time. And I think it's also really telling, like just as a little peek behind the curtain, as someone who studies energy expenditure and how it relates to body composition. If I were to write in a journal that this person gained 1 pound of muscle, or let's say they lost 1 pound of muscle and they lost 3.5 pounds of fat mass, if I were to make a statement in the highest tier journals saying this means their body lost X number of calories in total, not a single reviewer or journal or anyone with real expertise in this area would ever question that claim. They might quibble over, oh, you should have used 9,441 instead of 9,400 even when you're talking about the energy density of fat tissue. But the general premise that we can look at changes in body tissue over time and calculate an actual calorie value for what that deficit or surplus was, that is extremely established and settled and uncontroversial science among the people who uh, spend more time than could possibly be justified studying these topics.
I think it's also really important to point out that, in the absence of a health condition, we aren't seeing these alternative interventions that are somehow changing the game in terms of your energy expenditure or your metabolism or your ability to lose fat in a more expeditious rate. And so when it comes down to, I know you spoke about there are levels of complexity, especially when it comes to measuring these in the lab and the kind of equations that you might use to really tease out the nuances. But if we're talking about people who are trying to change their own body composition or people who are working with clients, it really isn't that complicated because there's only a few things that we can measure and there's only a few things that we can change. And this energy audit, if you will, is definitely a great exercise because it puts the numbers on the table. It says, here's where we are objectively. It's certainly not a must long term. There are plenty of people who are able to lose fat without tracking every single little thing.
Oh, yeah.
But it's a good exercise to kind of go through to really say, okay, here's where we are. And can I be more aware of the type of step count that I'm getting, the portions that I'm eating? I think it can be a really good exercise because I will speak with people and they'll say, oh, like I could never track my calories. I tried that. It was terrible. I never want to do that again. I get it. And I don't think that anyone should strive to do that forever. I think it's probably not great as a practice to be constantly tracking your calories and macros. But we can do it for a brief time if you think, I swear I'm doing absolutely everything the same. And I know that I haven't changed anything, and therefore it must be this other thing. If at least we go through this exercise of, like you said, making sure that we're not perhaps misinterpreting or underestimating or overestimating whatever the particular measurement is, then we can say, okay, well, at least we've done that as a starting point. But when it comes to all of these kind of fringe supplements or excuses that don't even really have a solution, it just sort of presents a problem. Like it's calories in, calories out doesn't work. It's about cortisol, but there's nothing you can do about that. Oh, calories in, calories out doesn't work. It's about estrogen, but there's nothing you can do about that. So that to me is so counterproductive because it just leaves people kind of spinning their wheels and never engaging in the things that actually could move the needle.
Yeah. Yeah. And you put it perfectly. I mean, the energy audit is an instructive exercise, not an intervention. And that's a big difference. And like you said, I mean, a lot of folks, once you can kind of get the conceptual buy-in that this whole calories in, calories out thing if you explain it with all the caveats and details and nuances that I mentioned previously, it actually does work. Then the question is, okay, well, then how do we move one of those two needles? And usually the diet side is easier to move than the energy expenditure side, within reason. Um, and that's when you start making changes, and it could be tracking or it could just be making swaps. How do we build a meal that's low in calories? And if things start slowing down, how do we take our low calorie meals and make them lower calorie meals? And I did a whole bodybuilding prep, the best prep I ever did, actually, in terms of outcomes and success. And I didn't track a single thing. I didn't track my protein. I didn't track my calories. I just started with a diet that was comfortable, and I changed it and changed it and changed it every time things slowed down. And that's literally all it takes. Now it was very hard. So I don't want to it's conceptually super easy, practically extremely difficult. And so it's important to also, as a coach, it's your job to make sure people know that, like, hey, I'm going to tell you that this is simple, but hard. And those are two different things. And the last thing I want to acknowledge, Lauren, like you said, everything I'm talking about here is assuming that there's not one of a very small number of medical conditions in play. So there will be some medical conditions that cause substantial water retention, and all of a sudden your scale weight is not reflective of changes in stored body energy, because water doesn't store energy, right? So that can throw off some of these calculations if you're not aware of it. Same thing, there's something called lipedema, where there's a lot of fat tissue storage in the lower body, predominantly affects women. And for whatever reason in lipedema, those fat cells are actually they actually are extremely resistant to regular, typical fat loss interventions. So there are some instances where some of this stuff, because of medical conditions, gets a little bit more complicated. But at the end of the day, the premise holds conceptually and quantifiably, as long as you are quantifying everything correctly. So it's really important to hang on to that as kind of a sanity check. Because Lauren, I mentioned the anecdote of stepping on the scale and being like, whoa, I have never seen that number. I've never seen anything close to that number. Something is off here. If not for the little sanity checks that are kind of baked in of just having studied this stuff for many years, I probably would have freaked out and been really worried and confused and said, something is off here. And I probably would have, tried to put a nail in the coffin of calories in, calories out. But instead I said, okay, I know what the deal is here. So doing more walking, getting into the gym more, watching my calories a little bit, making these, little changes here and there, and slowly but surely it's happening. And another thing that's worth noticing, the last thing I'll mention, Lauren, is if you're going to play the calories in, calories out game, which if you're trying to change your body weight, you are, whether you like it or not, whether you acknowledge it or not, you got to understand it's a long game. So the energy density of 1 kilogram of fat tissue, 2.2 pounds of fat tissue, is a little over 9,400 calories. So if you're cutting out, 100 or 200 calories here and there, it's going to take a long time for that to materialize into a long time of unwavering consistency to actually start turning that into 5 pounds of fat loss or 10 pounds of fat loss. So it's really important to understand when you're talking about making behavioral changes to make calories in, calories out work for you, you really need to be thinking not about your next 5,000 calories. You need to be thinking about what's going to have a big impact on my next 500,000 calories that I'm going to be consuming. And it's really important to play the long game and kind of zoom out and maintain that perspective. Because if you try to take this kind of sprint attitude to weight loss or fat loss, more often than not, it's going to be a lot of boom and bust, where you sprint forward, you lose a bunch of weight, you rebound, you catch it all back, and that causes even more frustration than you started. So, Lauren, anything else that we want to cover on that topic?
No, I think consistency is key, and start with something that is going to be sustainable. You kind of nailed that. And
All right,
don't
Lauren.
forget to track your farts along the walking. That's also
Yes.
an important metric for your energy audit.
Yeah, and that's not really a weight loss thing. That's more just a, those farts are somehow causing cancer in there. I don't know what they're doing,
Right.
but
It's longevity.
Lord willing, we will get to the bottom of it and find out what's happening in there. Um, but Lauren, we have one really important listener question that I wanted to address before we go.
Go for it.
What's the best sandwich?
Mm. The best
And Lauren,
sandwich.
you have a lot of options here because you're not a vegetarian, you're not constrained in the way I am. So you've got a full menu to pick from.
Well, you are a recent vegetarian, so you could be honest and talk about a sandwich with meat that you might not eat today.
Okay.
There is a Italian deli in Buffalo called Marco's, and they make their own bread, and it's a turkey, provolone. There's a homemade chili mayo. It's shredded lettuce, roasted red peppers. There are red onions, but I get it without because I hate onions. And it's delish.
Yeah. I would say number one sandwich is a hot dog, and the number two sandwich is a taco.
No.
Yeah.
A taco is not a sandwich ever. Nobody would say that a taco is a sandwich. And don't do the thing the taco. I mean, a hot dog is just bad in general, but neither of them are sandwiches. But I will say a hot dog is closer to a sandwich than a taco.
But I mean, so I guess for you, a flour-based, I struggle to see the difference between a hot dog bun and a flour tortilla. We're just taking a flour-based object and wrapping it around the subject matter of the sandwich.
It's thin, so it's more wrap-like, and it's not even fully wrapped.
So you don't consider a wrap a sandwich?
No, it's not a sandwich.
Wow.
But a full wrap that has the full covering that is wrapped multiple times is also different than a taco. There's no one who would consider a taco a sandwich. It's actually really gonna irritate me. Take it back.
Well, we're gonna have to let the controversy play out. We'll have to see, folks. If you're in the YouTube comments, drop us a line. Do you agree with a sensible person like me, very open-minded, who thinks, you know what? If a hot dog's a sandwich, which it is, then surely a taco fits the bill. Or are you more curmudgeon-y and closed-minded and generally not super nice?
What if what if it's crunchy, a hard shell taco? Is that still a sandwich then?
Yeah, we'll include it all. I think because the flour tortilla iteration of the taco is really the in. Like that is the loophole that allows you to then bring all tacos.
Most tacos are corn tortillas, not flour tortillas.
Oh, I know.
Tortilla would be, burrito, quesadilla. Do we need a Mexican food education? Because really, even you can have a soft shell corn, a crispy shell taco. That's not a sandwich. Nobody will agree that that's a sandwich. Then our nacho sandwiches, they're just mini sandwiches. You can, get a chip and put some stuff on it, put another chip, and then that's a sandwich.
Yeah, that's a great idea, actually. I think that does count.
Yes. Also a sandwich?
I'm on Reddit, and it just looks like everybody's on my side here. So folks in the comments, let us know if you're sensible or if you're not, and who you agree with. But yeah, I definitely hot dog number one, an American classic, and number two, a taco. We'll throw it in there. And the filling, you can put in anything. It's just a beautiful, beautiful sandwich. All right, everyone, weigh in on the controversy. Let us know how you feel. And as always, thanks so much for listening. We will be back in a week with another episode. In the meantime, we're going to try to do a lot of damage control for Lauren. I'm basically moonlighting as her PR person. Getting past the shill for the patriarchy claims was tough. The misogyny claims, those are even tougher. So wish me luck as I try to bury her or unbury her from this hole that she dug and try to restore her public image. So thanks so much for the support, everybody. If you want to get in touch with us, you can catch us in the comments on YouTube, or you can send an email to frontpagefitnesspodcast@gmail.com. Everybody take care, and we will see you soon.